The Tech It Up Talk podcast aspires to educate, inform, and inspire educators from teachers to school leaders on tips, tools, and resources to support the integration of technology into classroom instruction.
You ready? Here we go.
You're listening to Tech It Up Talk with Dr. Mac, your host with the most passion for supporting educators from teachers to school leaders with the integration of technology. Today, we are diving into another critical conversation about equity in technology leadership, specifically how we can ensure that urban schools have the resources, strategies, and leadership necessary to bridge the digital divide. Joining me today is Robin Tatmon, who is a passionate educator and advocate for equitable access to education. And she's also a contributing author to the Tech It Up Talk podcast. I'm sorry, to Get Your Tech Together book, where we're talking about rethinking school culture in a digital age. And her chapter, Equitable Tech Leadership in Urban Schools, really challenges us to rethink how we approach technology leadership and to create truly inclusive and transformative learning environments. So, welcome to the Tech It Up Talk podcast, Robin. It is super exciting to have you on today. And so, just come on and kind of share and introduce yourself and tell us about your background in education.
Yes, well, first off, thank you, Dr. Mac, for having me on today. I'm super excited to be here. And so, yes, my name is Robin Tatman. My background in education actually started like 12 years ago. 12 years ago, I started off as an English teacher. And then I taught English classes, I want to say ninth and 12th grade. But that's when I actually found the love of actually seeing how students can progress with technology integration. And so I finished my bachelor's at Prairie View, and then I went on to go to Texas State to receive my master's in ed tech. And when I tell you, I started implementing technology, starting off with, I want to say, what was it? I think it was at the time it was called Kahoot. I want to say, yeah, Kahoot. I was implementing Kahoot, and when I saw my students, like how they would respond to just the engagement, I said, okay, there's more that I need to do with this. And so then from there, I just became a ed tech champion. And so I really, really, really have a strong passion for educational technology. And I'm very much just I think about a lot how technology is constantly, evolving, right? And it's going to be here. And so for us, it's like we cannot, as a human, in the society, we cannot run from it, right? And so that actually leads me to that's what inspired me to focus on equitable tech leadership because of how so much technology is evolving and how we need to ensure that we are adapting to the change. And so, yeah.
Yeah, well, we need to continue to have champions like you, of course, because it takes change agents to really see change take place. And sometimes, when you're in the position as a change agent, it can seem daunting. It can seem like it's never going to happen sometimes. But I like to
Right.
remind people that when you're trying to really make a positive impact, especially in the education sector, you just have to, be willing to go through the work and continue to fulfill that passion and just be patient with people in the process and continue to find barriers and gaps, so we continue to need champions like you in the education field. And so I'm super excited that this was the chapter that you wrote about, because this is really important and I don't think we bring attention to it a lot in schools. And so, I mean, we hear about the digital divide, and we know that it exists, but I think there's so many variations of what it could look like and feel like, even within one setting
Right.
or within a school district, can still be divisive there. And so um, we're talking about urban schools specifically, but what are some of the biggest challenges that uh, schools may have when it comes to equitable access to technology?
I think some of the biggest challenges that we face. So right now, I'm in the thick of it, like I call it in the trenches. As an instructional technology specialist, I am in supporting a urban school, Title One school. I see every day what we are facing. Some of the challenges that we are facing, one thing I look at is like how to build not only just sustainable partnerships with like other tech companies, but just building sustainable systems that really looks at the type of devices that we're purchasing and the longevity of those devices and the funding. Um, so we know when the pandemic hit, right? Everybody was just like, I mean, everybody named Mama, they was just going, right? Just trying to get a device. And at the time, it really didn't matter. Like in some districts, it really didn't matter what type of device. It was just like every student needs a device, or need a device, and that was great. However, we then saw that the way that we were implementing our instruction, having various types of devices, that kind of like shuts down or either take away the access that students were able to try to obtain while receiving instruction. Like for example, we had students that were in CTE courses who needed the Word applications, who needed the Excel applications, right? But they were working on a Chromebook, right? And so when you have that Chromebook, those applications are cloud based, they're online, and so some features are not available that they may have to use in their CTE course. Whereas
Right.
when you have Gen Ed students, math, English, certain things they can't access online using a Chromebook. And so when we go back to those challenges that I see every day that we're facing is ensuring that we are again creating sustainable plans for our students so we ensure that we have the right device for them. And so now I know a lot of districts are moving towards Chromebooks,
Mhm.
because it's the more affordable, the more affordable choice in terms of just having districts funding for
Right.
sorry technology funding for the districts. However, I know that there's a solution when having those affordable devices, and then also ensuring that we have the right applications within those devices. I know that there's a solution, uh, but I want to make sure that for me personally, that I am fully aware of how to bring about those solutions and implement it district wide. Um, but I think that's what it is in terms of like the challenges, making sure that we one have a device that can basically do it all. Two, have a sustainable plan for these devices so that we aren't just throwing away money, right? And yeah, that's what I believe. Those are the challenges that we are facing.
Well, you said so much. Like I'm like, where do I go back? Like there's so many things to go back to. But I know one of the things I do want to go back to is COVID. So
Mhm.
definitely it's like you get a device, you get a device, you
Right.
get a device, you get a device, left and right. But we weren't really thinking about the systems to sustain a device. It was like,
Right.
no, they have no way to get connected. Let's get connected. And sadly, it had to have an event like COVID for us to even get there. Because if we were already we were pushing these initiatives prior to COVID, and if we were already in a
Right.
position to be innovative and up with times, so some schools I don't feel like experience it to the same degree as others who weren't set up and ready, and some people might just not have the funding. And this unfortunately pandemic helped support with the funding to get access to resources they didn't have before. But you're
Mhm.
right, like just ensuring that the device that you're purchasing is applicable to the needs of the school, and thinking through
Right.
solutions to implement and make sure you're still supporting all access is really important. But I also think that's a issue that has happened over time. Like sometimes, we have decision makers who go and say, oh, this is what we need, but they don't really think about all the other little things. And
Yes.
so I think it's really important for schools and districts that have voice, equity of voice. So like when you are about to buy something that's going to be impactful across a district at a large initiative, it's great to get input or insight. Especially a lot of times we find that IT tend to make
Mhm.
these decisions, but a lot of times IT don't have instructional experience. And so they don't
Exactly.
understand instruction. So it's like,
Exactly.
you're kind of battling like the technical side versus
Mhm.
instructionally what can work in the classroom. And I think
Right.
that becomes a challenge sometimes. So
For sure.
definitely.
And I like to add to that because we're talking about the digital divide, but that right there, what you just said, that's a part of the divide as well. Because when you think about the IT piece, right? IT, hardware, network and all that, but then also that instructional component, we cannot forget about that because we're all working together, right? And
Right.
so and I've experienced that. It's okay. You have to make sure that when you're making these decisions at the district level or, higher up executive leadership, you have to make sure that you know what's going on these campuses. Because if not, you're going to provide a tool that's not beneficial for the students at the end of the day.
Right. Not beneficial for the students, didn't have a voice. And I think when we're talking about building culture, I think it's important to, even if you don't feel like that voice is as valid as another voice, but to still be inclusive of that voice, because even though they may not have the technical experience that they need, they
Right.
are boots to the ground with the scenarios and the solutions that are needed, whether it's for special education accommodations, accessibility features, how to manage and run classrooms, classroom management, like what are the pieces to really consider. And like one of the things I did when I was the director of digital learning was I created an advisory council. And so with
Yes.
that, you have people that are in different parts. Now, I'm not going to act like this advisory council was just the easiest thing to put together because in education, we're busy. We're putting out fires. It's always something
Right.
every day. And trying to get those meetings that you need to make those decisions can sometimes be challenging because you need the time to dedicate, but you also are dedicating your time to other areas. But it's really
Correct.
important to have the CTE voice there.
Yes.
It's important to have, even athletics. I think the athletics gets shout out sometimes.
Mhm.
Special education definitely needs to have a voice there, and making sure that we are considering the different unique challenges that we have. And then the other part of that too is that sometimes when we're talking about funding, we can overspend because sometimes we may have features that we really don't realize that we have access to, and this
Right.
department is going over here to go purchase something in addition to that may be a
Right.
part of this built-in system. And so it's really thinking about
Right.
all the needs. And so like one of the things we that we tried to do was like pick the important parts of the pedagogical process that we thought were important,
Mhm.
whether it
Mhm.
were being able to facilitate lessons, or being able to, if a student was absent, being able to record, or
Right.
accessibility features, being able to text to speech, all those different things, and try to make sure we had applications that align to
Mhm.
common goals. And I think that helps with creating equitable access across when you think across that way. So my
For
leaders out
sure.
there who, yeah, if you're out there, curriculum team, IT team, district level, you see the latest and greatest, and we're just trying to save money. Make sure you
Right.
have a holistic approach because all these moving pieces really do matter, especially if you're trying to make
It
a meaningful
does.
impact and lift the instructional process, which is a whole nother story
Right.
of,
Yes.
of equitable instruction.
Yes, and that is a mouthful. Yes, you're absolutely correct. For
Yeah,
sure.
so I love that we're really talking about, because a lot of times when people hear the digital divide, they go straight to like what students don't have access to. And
Yes.
sometimes we may have given access, but the divide is still there because we're not
Mhm.
maximizing where the gaps are so
Where they
that we
got
can close it. Yeah.
for
And so,
sure.
yeah.
And like for us, like when I say us, but like in my experience, I'm glad that you said like, we're thinking about like, oh, access, but it goes beyond that. When we even talk about like, for example, just today I had a couple of students that came in and was like, hey, so I've been using this device and it's, Windows device. However, when I used to have a Chromebook, and so now it's like, okay, why do I have to switch from one skill to another skill and doing all these? Why, like the student came to me saying, why can't they have a one streamline type of device that they can use? Because it was a situation where when he switched to the Windows, he couldn't get on. Like it was like the signal, and the signal was like, he was losing signal, and basically it was just like some issues that he was having with that device, and he just went on this tangent like, I don't understand, like when I went from middle school to high school I always received either this Chromebook, that Chrome type of Chromebook, and a Windows device. He's like, why can't we just have one type of device? And this is coming from a student.
Student voice is important. Like I really
Right.
like because at the end of the day, they're who we service.
Right.
That's who we need to make an impact for. And like
Our
even in my last
customers.
school district, we yeah, they're our customers, right? And
Yes.
so even our superintendent had like a student advisory panel that
Mhm.
would be able to bring things back because I think it is important to hear their voice, especially if the adults keeps like I'll give the internet outage as an issue. Like no, nothing's wrong with the internet if you're not reporting it, right? And it's hard for IT to kind of really identify what the issue is, if it's really Wi-Fi, if it's a switch, or whatever the case it could be in a building. But sometimes when the report isn't happening, kids are still saying, "What, bro? We're still out," and we're
Right.
not listening. And so that is important. But to the device part, let me tell you, I've seen we want to create equitable learning experience, and
Yes.
the challenge is if you have we already have inequities with the teacher having a different device from the students a lot of times, and
Yes. That's
sometimes
true.
when it's set up that way, they don't really understand the student's full experience because they're not using the same device. Because a
Mhm.
Chromebook feel is different from a
Different.
Windows feel. And so, you're used to things working a certain way. And then even your automatic reactions of how you move around. Like if I was to go to a Chromebook right now, man, what is right click?
Yes. User experience is totally different. I had to learn today. I had to Google how to do a screenshot on a Chromebook. And on Windows, it's easy for me. I can just
Yeah.
snip it.
Right. And so it's just like those small things. But to I've seen it to where some schools even had those inequities in the classroom where I know they just needed devices, but some devices were touch screens, some devices
Right.
weren't, some were could flip back 360. And so depending on what application you're using, if you before Flipgrid or Microsoft Flip went away, it didn't go away all the way, but before it went away, mainstream, the internet-based version, some teachers would leverage that as a tool. But if you had different resources to use where some kids have the touch screen and they can turn into a tablet and write and
Yes.
annotate. Then the student who didn't have that, then we just created an inequitable experience because
Yes.
now we're using technology in a different way with this student, and it's not the same with the other student or
Yes.
this class versus another class. And those are the experiences I think that need to be thought through. So even if
Mhm.
you are on a budget, I would definitely try to make sure that at least within the classroom, there's the same set of devices and not even inequities because for teachers who don't have the technology experience, it's really hard
Mhm.
for them to
It
manage
is.
that.
It is.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
believe, and even I mentioned this in my chapter of the book, because you mentioned like the teachers like not having that experience, as digital technology leaders, we
Mhm.
have to ensure that we provide the right professional development for them too, and like even from, well, I guess not just from like an instructional standpoint of like, integrating in content, but honestly, how to use your device. Just the basic how to use a Chromebook, Chromebook 101, or Windows 101. I believe as tech leaders, we have to make sure that we're doing that. It may seem mundane, but we have a lot of teachers who are like, oh my gosh, like when, if they're having a new interactive board, right? What plan are we going to implement that's going to actually have it to where teachers are learning like each year, especially like, with new teachers? What does that look like when we have new teachers come in and we want to ensure that they get equipped to using these clearboard panels, right? Or either using their laptop, So, yes, thank you for bringing that up. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a real thing that happens, and sometimes it's those small things that I don't think everyone catches or bring attention to. But that's why like this podcast exists because we want to close those
Right.
gaps and create opportunities for people to understand and know that those small things make a big difference in the learning environment.
For sure.
Now, your chapter highlights, the role of leadership, one of my favorite things to highlight in ensuring tech equity. So, what does it mean to be equitable tech leader in an urban school setting?
So, what does it mean to be an equitable tech leader in an urban school setting? It's so when I wrote about this piece, I had to really sit back and reflect. Um, I reflected on, okay, what does equity look like? And I reflected on my true experience, my truth in working in a Title One school as a tech leader. And I believe what it looks like is doing whatever it takes to ensure students are receiving not just the access, but also the experience, the user experience that they need. And teachers are receiving that as well. So, what do you mean by that? This is what I mean by that. So, providing opportunities where teachers can maybe attend a lunch and learn during school, after school, where they're actually getting one-on-one or hands-on experience of how to use their device, how to implement a certain application, where students are receiving the same thing, opportunities, whether it's like, through slideshows on the campus screens of how to log in. It's small things like that. So when we think about equity tech leadership, it's not something that at large you got, like, from me and within my experience, I have to start small on campus by just having a conversation with the student, by just having a conversation with the teacher and saying, hey, did you know that you can do control alt delete or something like that to get to sign out, or either using the snipping tool. Small things like that. Begins conversations for equitable technology leadership, because what you're doing is you're providing access. You're showing you're showing others how to use technology in this environment. And when I say it's hard, I'm sorry, how to use technology in the learning environment. And when I say that it's a challenge, I don't want to say hard, but it's a challenge. The challenge is knowing that every day when I come to school, it's going to be something different. It's going to be the Wi-Fi down. It's going to be some students not bringing their laptops and having to have some type of backup. It's going to be, oh, we don't have enough devices or something. That's the experience in Title One schools. You know, um, we make it work with what we have, um, and we try our best to secure this funding. However, you have to make sure that you know your environment to try to fill those gaps. And again, I don't care if it's something small as using a snipping tool. I don't care if it's small as just teaching your teachers how to do control or delete to sign out their laptop. I believe in, for me, that right there is equitable technology leadership, because you're teaching them something that they did not know and you're starting small. It doesn't have to be this large, oh, we're going to just immerse ourselves in AI. It doesn't have to be that big of a deal, that big deal. Instead, I say start small, because there are multiple things in Title One schools that we deal with day after day. Once you start small, then you can start building your champions. Then your champions can start building other champions. And then, we can go far with just learning the snipping tool, right? And so and I will have a whole PD on knowing how to use a snipping tool. But I believe that's what it is. That is what it is to me, to be a tech leader in an urban school, to ensure that there's equitable tech leadership. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and just to kind of expand on what you said about the PD, a lot of times we give like these one-off opportunities where, especially at the beginning of the school year, like it's just not enough time to get to
Yeah.
learn the instructions, get the building rules, and learn a new tool, and all the things that you need to do to set up and set students up for success for the school year. And but building a professional learning plan that can help with supporting that. And I love that you said building champions, because sometimes as the leader, it doesn't have to be you. You can set up for success by creating opportunities to create those champions and leveraging them to elevate the voice of support of that culture within your campus. I think even it, because a lot of times some leaders that aren't necessarily in tech directly, but like
Mhm.
your principals, your instructional specialists,
Right.
anyone that may not feel like they're like the digital leader on the campus, but
Yeah.
they're still tech leaders. Like this, I think that tech leadership still needs to happen within them, because we want to build capacity within our program so that this is a part of the culture. And so just creating those opportunities and thinking through that the other part is that technology isn't a separate part of the learning process. It's really a central component to make learning happen and maximize learning in the classroom. And a lot of
Right.
times we separate the implementation of that, and even understanding that I think is really important for our any leader, whether they're tech specific or not, to embrace that and bring that in, because now you're changing or maximizing the learning experience and not just focusing specifically on the technology that you're using, but you're amplifying it with the technology. So
Right.
yeah, I love the champion idea. Yeah.
Yes.
So what are some steps that our leaders can do to ensure that technology is being used equitably across all students in all classrooms?
Wow, I'm glad you asked that because I have the book right here.
Ooh, look,
But no,
here too.
what so one of the things I actually talk about in terms of the steps that leaders can do to ensure that they're implementing equitable tech leadership, or just in a excuse me, in an urban school, is one of the most important things I believe is to conduct a digital equity audit. And so basically what you're doing with this audit is you are assessing, you're evaluating what you have, in your learning environment. What that may look like sending out a survey to students and teachers to see, okay, what does your device, does your device work? Does it connect to the internet? Do you have access at home? Um, are you able to check out a device? Like, are you able to just basically you're assessing what you have,
Mhm.
because in order to you're doing a needs assessment basically
Right.
in order to plan that digital that technology plan for your environment. And so that's one of the things that I know that I wrote in the book, that leaders should do. And I think that's one of the most important things to start off with, is because when you assess your environment, you'll know how to approach your environment. You'll know how to make the right decisions on when it comes to funding, purchasing. You'll know how to make sure that you provide the right professional development. You'll basically what you're doing is identifying your gaps. The same thing that you'll do in instruction when you do that first diag for your students, you're doing the same thing. Have that same mindset when you are
Right.
trying to plan for for your campus.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
I love that.
yeah. And then two, I have one more because I have five steps, but one more too. One of the things I say in terms of making sure that you have a good plan. The first step is doing that assessment. The second step is making sure that within that assessment, you plan for the right professional development for your students and your not just your student, I'm sorry, for your teachers, so that they can make sure that they give the right instruction for the students. And that right there can be utilized from your first step is, implementing that digital assessment plan, that needs assessment.
Yeah, I love that. And then, something else that, of course, that is taking education by storm is AI.
Hmm.
And I hate to say that, but we have a divide already. But I mean, AI has been around for a long time, so it's not just coming in. It's just kind of taking us by storm with some of the advances that has happened in recent years. But um, with that in mind, like we don't want to continue to create a bigger gap. And so, like, how can our school leaders um, ensure that the advancements don't widen the equity gap so much more, but instead create more opportunities for students?
It's kind of like the approach that you did. Had you took the advisory, like you created an advisory team. I think one of the a, um, a best practice as a tech leader is to create that committee, create that advisory team, and actually get your hands kind of wet on or dirty with going and diving into AI applications and seeing what it looks like, and use that advisory teams as I hate to say it like this, but the guinea pigs, to see what does it look like, because we have to make sure that we are actually in it and experiencing it so that we'll know how to approach it. So I think the first thing to ensure is to make sure you create that advisory board, or that committee, and let's start playing around to see how our students do respond? How do our teachers respond to it? Right? And then from there, I believe that you just make that plan. I think, yeah, you have to get a group of people involved first, people that you trust, you know, and then get them involved and having conversations about it.
Yeah, I think the other part is like becoming a consumer of it. What I
Hmm.
found too is that a lot of the apprehensions because they really didn't know how it worked. They kind of just heard about the scary things or just make assumptions and focus on students cheating and you
Right.
know but I love the element of bringing voices together and perspectives because you know they can play off each other just like you're talking
Yes.
about building champions. You may have some champions that may oh man I did this and I saved so much time and people start to
Hmm.
ideate and start thinking through things. And then you have you know your students and like get their voice in like what are some ways that it's helped? What are some ways that you know and what are some ways can we rethink how we assess what our students
Right.
know because they have
And
access to
and I
yeah.
and I do want to add this too. Like for, this is a raw experience. I just went in and I was like, "Hey, I pitched this to people, my where I work, and I said, look, there is something that TEA is doing. TEA is actually using AI to grade the ECRs in English, the STAR test, and I said, why can't we do that? Why can't we take that same approach to be ahead of that curve? And so I fought, my partner and I, we fought, and we basically, our campus is the first campus within our district to actually pilot an AI application. And I think
Mhm.
that approach is, again, you have to have your champions, you have to have your people that's willing to go out there and just say, hey, let's go ahead and try to get our feet wet to see
Right.
what we come out with.
Yeah, I love that. And I did something similar too, but I did the switch on focusing on enhancing student writing because
Hmm.
we knew that AI was really leveraging the grading piece. But I think that aha moment when teachers started using it, started rethinking even their biases and how they were scoring
Right.
across each other. And so that's kind of closing an equity gap and leveraging the technology to be more equitable, right? So,
Right.
um,
For sure.
but
Yes.
it was definitely some ahas because I think that especially when the results came back, a lot of people didn't understand how the AI was able to, you know, score this student who wrote all this
Yes.
writing, and then this student who may have wrote this much, and they got a higher score than the person that wrote a longer
Yes.
piece. But it wasn't about how much was written; it's about the quality
With
about
the
what was
quality.
written. Yeah, and so I did took it from an approach of like leveraging AI to give students feedback,
Hmm.
so that they can be better writers. And so
Yes.
yeah, it's like taking those initiatives and really expanding and bringing it into conversation. So I love that you and your partner kind of went for it because that's what change agents do. That's what champions do.
Yes.
And it may not always be easy, but you know somebody has to roll up their sleeve and do the work to make the impact in education. So that's definitely commendable that you guys took that on and to really make an
Thank you.
impact. And I'm sure some other schools and districts are going to jump on and see when they start seeing the progress.
For sure.
Yeah. And so, if there was one key takeaway that you want to share with listeners to kind of remember about equitable tech leadership, and so, or something that's important, what would that one key takeaway be?
For leaders, one key takeaway that I want our leaders to know and to remember is, I'm just gonna go back to my steps. I tell this to my partners and my coworkers all the time. When it comes to technology, there are two things that's very important. And this is just my thing. This is the Robinism, a Tatmanism.
Robinism, I love it.
So there are two things: access and safety. When I say access, I'm talking about not just devices, but also just looking at the overall instruction in your environment, right? So ensuring that you do that, that's step one of making sure that you complete that needs assessment to know what type of access that you need to provide for your learning environment. And two, safety. We want to make sure that with the access that we are providing, we want to ensure that our students are digital citizens within the online environment and that they are safe, that they know how to navigate through these new technologies that they're experiencing, right? Because many things happen online. and
Right.
we want to make sure that we are creating profound digital citizens in this new age, this 21st century of learners. And so that's what I want them to walk away with is access and safety. And one of the best ways you can do that is by first making sure that you follow this digital needs assessment to know your environment.
I
And that's
love
it.
that. I love that. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. Well, let everyone know how they can connect with you and be a part of your learning network.
Yes. And so, oh Lord, I'm not really good at these. I'm learning how to do this social media stuff. So you can connect with me at, let's see, on Twitter. It is the ed tech underscore consult. So the ed tech underscore consult on Twitter. I'm sorry, on X. And then on LinkedIn, I am just Robin Tatmon. You can find me on LinkedIn and Robin Tatmon. And then, of course, I want you all to know that I have a podcast myself. You can find my podcast at bit.ly/ Urban EdTech Podcast. That's a capital U, capital ET podcast. That's podcast is capitalized as well. So yes, the Urban EdTech Podcast. And yes, and that is it.
All right, Robin. Well, you guys make sure to connect with her, follow her podcast, follow her on social media. Robin, thank you so much for joining me today and really shedding light on the importance of equitable tech leadership in urban schools. Of course, your chapter is a very powerful resource, I think, for school leaders who are looking to really make a real and meaningful impact and make a change in their environment and really assess, listen, learn, and create these opportunities for our students and our teachers. And so, listeners, those of you who are committed to bridging the digital divide and ensuring that every student has access to high quality learning opportunities, be sure to grab your copy of Get Your Tech Together and connect with me and Robin for more insights. As always, thank you guys for tuning in to Tech It Up Talk with Dr. Mac, where we explore how to level up learning with technology. So until next time, keep innovating, keep inspiring, and keep leading with tech.